Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight on another episode of Breaking Reality. My name is Joshua McGuire, and I am your host. And with us tonight, we have Dmitria Burby, and we are going to be discussing um, knowledge of what is beyond the 3D. And so, let me go ahead and turn this over to Demetria. Let her tell us a little bit about herself, and then we can get started in on tonight's conversation.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Dmitria Burby. I am an author and a healer. I have been on this path for probably longer than I realize, but definitely aware of being on the path for the last several years. And I'm super excited just to talk tonight about that first moment when you realize there's something beyond the 3D, and then what that is exactly. How do you process that? What is that, and how you get to that point. So excited to have this conversation tonight.
Excellent. Well, I think for some people, we might need to start off by just letting them know what the 3D is. Because some people might be going, "What are you talking about with 3D?"
When I think about the 3D, and I would love to hear your opinion, but when I think about the 3D is everything that we physically can touch, things that we can see, that everybody can agree on is our reality, our environment that we live in. So that to me is the physical world that humans are, normally exposed to.
Yeah, and I mean that's really my understanding of the 3D as well. Is this physical realm that we see with our senses, our day to day life, and then there and we've talked about it on the show before. There's more beyond this too. That we see with a different kind of sight and a different kind of vision, and and we go into those things. But yeah, as far as 3D, it's this thing that we physically see, touch, feel, taste, hear, things that we use our physical senses for every day to interact with.
Of the analogies that I have really used in my journey to help ground me is I think Anthony Peake writes about it in one of his books, but basically he describes the electromagnetic field that we as humans can measure, right? So this is a scientific thing, but what we can measure, what we know for sure exists, if you ran it out, end to end and imagined it to be the size of the Mississippi. So from the very beginning of the Mississippi all the way to the Gulf, that's the size of the electromagnetic field. And within that, we essentially can see 1 square inch, right? So, like this tiny little box within what
Yep.
we know we can measure. And so often when we think about the 3D world, it lies in that 1 inch box because that's what our senses can detect naturally. And so I think a lot about us being confined into, this pretty narrow vision of what actually exists in the world. And I think I saw some like amazing documentary. It was like a Planet Earth or something where they show the vision of what other animals can see at night
Hmm.
with their vision. And I'm like, every time just blown away because so often, I mean, I grew up very Catholic, but very out of touch with what might lie beyond the 3D. And so even that gentle knowledge and nudge of wow, there are so many other creatures on this earth that experience what we experience in a totally different way through how their senses have evolved.
Right, and it's one of those things. It's like one of the ongoing jokes with one of my friends is the cat sitting there talking with the shadow person or communing with the shadow person in the kitchen, just staring at the corner. They see things that are in a different spectrum than what we can see with our own vision. And so sometimes when you see an animal just staring at something, or what are you like a dog, what are you barking at? There's nothing there. Well, we may not be able to see it, but there might be something there that they're seeing.
Or hearing, right? Like
Right.
it's really common knowledge that dogs have a different hearing range than we do. And I think it's so fascinating that for most of us, we can naturally accept that a dog can hear something different or an animal can see something different, but that humans are not able to access that. And so it's somehow really easy for people that are, not in touch spiritually or at least haven't experienced something beyond the 3D to say, like, I can totally handle this dog hears, a different range in the audio spectrum. But for you to do it is, beyond something that people are willing to accept. It's a really interesting point of tension, I think, in people's ability to accept and understand what's really going on.
Exactly. And for me, and people that's watched the show know this. I'm a member of the Oklahoma Native American Church, which we work with different sacred sacraments, plant sacraments, and stuff. And we work with things like psilocybin mushrooms, with peyote, with ayahuasca, and things like this. And I've had experience with all of these throughout my time, and I know for a fact that when I am working with these different sacraments, they allow me to tie in to being able to see and hear and feel things on different ranges. And like even when I'm working with ayahuasca, I always have some kind of music going. But what I do is I play solfeggio frequency music, and depending on what frequency I am playing, I have a different reaction to that frequency, because at that point in time, my body becomes so sensitive to frequencies and I become so in tune with them. You feel them differently than you do normally. And like I play solfeggio frequency music all the time. I sleep to it. It's something that I'm really big on. I use different frequencies for different things. And and that's one of those things that when you really look at it, it's like, okay, well, I really don't, it's some strange sounds, but it's not, something that most people would be like, oh, well, that's this many, this is 432 hertz and this is 517 hertz and stuff. Most people can't pick that up with just their ear. It's something that they really got to train, or just be able to look at some kind of monitor output that says this is what's going on. But when you're working with those plant medicines, you can tell when one of those changes.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is when you have had an experience where you can actually feel the difference in frequency, that your body is in that different state where you are receiving and open in that way. And then when you're out of that state and you are maybe listening to the music at night as you sleep, right? Like, that frequency is actually doing things to your body and shifting things,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really hard if you've never had that experience to wrap your head fully around like exactly what's happening to your body and how it's shifting in those really subtle ways.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the experiences that I've talked about a little bit on the show is back in 2019. I had a really really severe surgery. I had um, pretty much a life threatening infection that had gotten into my body, and they had to go in and cut out a section in my leg where this infection was, to get rid of it, because it was, if not, it was going to kill me. um and it was from a cyst that I didn't know had formed. It had went in instead of coming up to the surface, and it had formed into an abscess and ruptured, and they had to go in and cut it out and clear it out. And I had a really severe surgical wound because it was really big and deep, so they couldn't just stitch it shut. It had to be open, and they had to let it heal from the inside to close. So it was a long healing process. And when I went to the wound care doctor, this was in July of 2019 when I first saw him. He said, you're going to be in the nursing home and the recovery ward until at least after the holidays, if not longer. Don't expect to probably be out there until sometime in end of January or beginning of February. I told him, no, that doesn't work for me. I said, I want to be home by the holidays so I can spend time with my family during the holidays. And so, one of the things that I done was actually use sophageo frequencies that were tuned for healing and for causing soft tissue to repair and heal. And I was declared fully healed. I was out of the nursing home at the end of by the end of October, and I was declared fully healed on December 3rd of that year. And so way sooner than they expected. And he's like, "Well, how'd you do this?" I'm like, "Well, I could probably tell you, but you probably are going to think I'm crazy."
Totally, totally. That like the power of what is considered alternative medicine today, right? Like
Yeah.
sound healing, energy work, like all of these things. I mean, even the intention of saying like I am going to be healed before the
Oh yeah.
holidays, and like really speaking that into the universe, and so often I think people bypass like the power that we have in our words and our intentions. And it's just so important when you're dealing with health issues or really, anything in your life.
Well, I mean, another thing that I done during that time was one of my spiritual mentors, who's been on the show several times, Demian Gover. Demian told me, he said, "Hey, speak to your body. Tell your body what it needs to do to heal. Speak to your body on a cellular level. Tell those cells that they need to heal, that they need to knit together, they need to repair, they need to create that new flesh and skin and everything that, those blood vessels and everything that needs to come back into that area to heal it up." And that was another part that I done. I would spend hours, I was basically bedbound for a long part of it, so I would just lay in bed and meditate and focus on that while playing the solfeggio frequency music. And that's how I passed a lot of my day. And I mean, I healed up dramatically faster than what they were expecting me to.
That's so amazing. I mean, complete testament to what can be done.
Yeah, and I mean that's working, in a way that's working with things that's beyond the 3D world as well. It's working with things that are, it's just showing what is really out there, and that's just even starting to just get into the tip of the iceberg with it, though.
I mean, what was your first experience? I guess, what was your first experience of something beyond the 3D, like viscerally? And when you had that experience, were you prepared for it? Did you know that that's what was going to happen?
Uh, Prepared for it? I wouldn't say I was necessarily prepared for it, but I remember as a child being able to see things that other people couldn't see. You know, I grew up seeing what a lot of people refer to as shadow people. And that's something that's beyond a lot of people's vision or sight, and that was something that I would see commonly. And it was just, you know, to me, it was just kind of, I just thought it was natural. I just thought it was something everyone else could do. And then when I like started talking about it, I grew up in a really conservative Christian household. When I mentioned that, my parents lost it. All of a sudden, there was something going on. What kind of demonic forces are involved? What evil is going on here? And like, yeah, no, it was one of those things. And then like I stopped talking about it, and I tried to stop doing it. And like I would see them, I'd be like, "You guys need to go away. You're gonna get me in trouble."
Yeah, yeah. And it did it work? Did they go away?
Not really. I mean, there was a point in time where, as I got older, some of it got repressed and stuff. But it was when I started dealing with some depression and anxiety issues, and I went on medications for those. It it removed that ability to work with those things, and then when I came off of those medications, that ability started to come back.
Yeah, it's amazing that you say that. That was a big part of my own journey of really dealing with anxiety and, what I now see as depression, but at the time I was like, "I just have anxiety, I'm not depressed." And my doctor was like, "Okay, well, we'll just try this medicine for you. It does both." I was like, "Okay," and happily took it, thinking that it would solve all my problems. I would be, free taking this medicine, and what ended up happening is I just got worse, right? Like the medicine actually didn't help me. It made the problem worse. I just had more anxiety and was tied up in knots in a way that I couldn't actually undo myself. And then when I just made a decision one day. I was like, I still have so much anxiety. I don't know. I'm just going to like taper off of these drugs. I didn't talk to my doctor. However, if you're listening, you should, because it can really mess you
Absolutely.
up. But I did taper like really cautiously off of the medicine over like 6 months to a year. And then I really started in on like opening myself up to whatever was coming into my life. And it's funny because as I was doing that, I knew it all along, but I didn't actually consciously know it. So like subconsciously I was doing all these things to put all these, like put all the pieces in place in my life for what was coming, but I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I just was like, yeah, I should do this, like listening to my gut instinct, my intuition, and took me to a pretty awesome place.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's funny because like some of the things when you're dealing with those kind of medications, and for me, what it done was it just numbed me out. The medications I was
Mm.
on just kind of numbed me out, and I didn't feel much of anything. It was just like I was the way I describe it. I was like a zombie. I was just I was alive. I was breathing. I was surviving. I was walking around. I could interact with people, but I was just numb to everything. And to me, that wasn't living. And so I just decided that there's got to be something else. I have talked with people, and I went to therapy, and I was seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and I was going to group therapy sessions and stuff too, and I'm like, I'm trying to do all these things. Just teach me how to get through this. Teach me how I can deal with this and how I can live life. And none of it worked for me. And I want to preface that it didn't work for me. If you are dealing with these things and you're on medications and it's working for you, please don't stop.
Agree.
If the medications aren't working for you, please talk to your doctor about it, and develop a plan with them
Mm.
to either try something else or to taper off, or to go at it a different way. By no means am I saying just, get off your medications and stop doing these things, because I tapered down off of the medications too. And I went off of them slowly so I didn't have any effects with them. But when I got off of the medications and I started to get some clarity back, I started doing things like I had been in martial arts for since I was 10 years old. I'd started taking martial arts, and so meditation was a common thing for me. It was something that I was trained to do in martial arts, but we approached meditation and what we was doing in a different way. It was to calm and clear your mind to prepare yourself for your training, and for
Mm.
when you was sparring and different things, or going into a tournament. It was to clear your mind so you could focus in on things. And so I really started going back to my meditation roots and getting deeper with it, and deeper and deeper and deeper. And as I dove deeper into that meditation, I started getting some of those old abilities back. I started seeing things beyond. I started, sometimes I'd get into a deep meditative trance, and, in there I could get to the point where I would start to have visions. And, I was having different things going on while doing deep, deep meditation. And then I'd have to say, I think I was in my early 20s when I picked up my first book on shamanic journeying. It was by Sandra Ingram.
I love
And
her. Yeah.
and the book came with a CD that had some shamanic drumming with it. So I started meditating to that, and that took me to a whole different level. Once I started being able to focus in on the drumming and then kind of drop into a meditative trance with that and then use that to start the journey, I started listening to people who were doing guided meditations, which helped take me to different levels and learn how to control where I went within my meditation.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that was a big first step into the process and the journey with me, was once I had gotten off of those medications and getting back in touch with these gifts, and reconnecting with them and doing that meditative work.
Yeah. Very similar journey. I mean, meditation is so critical to reconnecting with yourself and that place that is beyond the 3D. I think it's interesting that you come off the medication, you get deep into, or you can, yeah, and then you get deep into meditation, right? And that opens you back up. When I was first starting out, when I would meditate, but I didn't really understand what meditation was for. And I think
Hmm.
so many people fall into this category where they don't really understand what they're ultimately going to receive when they meditate, right?
Right,
Meditation is like, how do I quiet my mind? How do I stop thinking about all of my to-do lists? It's going to help
right,
relieve stress. It's going to, make me feel better, whatever. But ultimately, that is the first step of getting to a place where you can really feel inward and like feel into the energy of your body and then go to through the portal into a whole different realm.
right,
And it's like we don't actually publicly tell you, right? Like Headspace isn't like, hey, we're the portal, we're the gateway drug into a whole other existence. We're just like, we're here to relieve stress. We're gonna walk you through some things to help you calm your mind.
right. We're going to teach you some mindfulness techniques, some meditation techniques, teach you how to kind of relax, how to release some of that tension, how to just kind of get into a good headspace. Oh yeah, by the way, you're going to go into some really crazy stuff too. Don't trip out when it happens.
You'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Meditate long enough and you'll access that place.
Yeah, and it's really one of those interesting things that once I really got into there, because I will admit, some of the first times that I started trying to do really long, deep meditations, I'd fall asleep.
I still fall asleep, but
Yeah.
that's like the beauty, right? There's a beauty in falling asleep. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day. They were like, every time I try and meditate, I fall asleep. And I said, well, you probably are actually moving from a very three-dimensional physical state into a spirit state where you are
Hmm.
actually accessing it, but you're not your human brain is not quite ready to comprehend what you're going and doing. And so it just switches off your body, right? It switches off the like memory so that it doesn't overwhelm you. So if you're falling asleep, I don't think of it as a bad thing. I think of it as you're still like going and doing the work that you needed to do on a
Hmm.
spiritual level to heal or to like find that grounding, that reconnectedness that we're all, I think, ultimately looking for. And you're just not quite ready to comprehend what that feels like or looks like for you right now. But it's still worth your time to do it, even if you're falling asleep.
Oh, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that, because even then, like even when I would fall asleep, the sleep was so refreshing and restful, and what I would come out of from that experience was I was more energized and revitalized than, if I just, went to bed and slept throughout the night and woke up in the morning. But also at the same time, I was also studying on lucid dreaming. So I
Mhm.
was learning how to control my dream state and how to control what happens and where I go within that dream state while I would get to that point, which eh, when you start getting to the point of doing things like shamanic journeys where you're going into those other realms, it is very much like a lucid dreaming state. And so it kind of all went hand in hand and me learning how to handle this so that when it actually did come time when I had my first experiences, and like I said, I'd had the experience at 15 with working with peyote, and it was with a Lakota Sioux chief and a couple of the elders from the Lakota Sioux tribe that I was working with that took me through this experience. And so I had that, and when I went through that, I didn't fully understand a whole lot of it, and unfortunately, because of the context of when I did it, that I was actually working as a manager at this facility where it happened at, I didn't necessarily have all the time to integrate it or sit down and get to talk through to fully understand it. So it wasn't until I actually worked with those kinds of sacraments later in my life again that I really started to understand them. And I even started to get more of an understanding in it when I started getting deeper and deeper into the shamanic meditations and stuff. And I was doing that without using any sacraments. I was just, with rhythmic drums and meditation practices that I was starting to get into this. And I was like, whoa, hold on. This is like what happened when I had that peyote experience.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that you're saying, like, you can get into those states without, the support of a plant medicine or a sacrament. And I think that's such an important piece of information for people to realize is that yes, there are definitely places and a purpose for sacraments, for plant medicine, for, ways to support the opening of your channels into those other realms, but it is also completely possible and done on a regular basis without support of those things. So, you
Absolutely.
know, it is I for me it's really important that everybody feel like they have a path to getting to that place of accessing what's beyond, that you don't have to feel like you have to do this or that or whatever's trendy right now, that there are whatever journey, whatever way that you do it is perfectly acceptable and probably what's meant for you. So,
Right.
my path and like how I got there and how you got there are probably going to be very different and very different than somebody else. And I just love that that's a truth about this practice, that it's accessible and available to literally like anybody regardless of your stance on any of
Right.
that stuff.
And I know some people who can't use these sacraments because they're on certain medications and stuff that will have interactions with it. I've had people come to me asking me about, things like ayahuasca, and they're on something that will interact with the MAOI that's in ayahuasca, and it can cause some severe health issues and stuff if you do. And I tell them, I said, if you're really wanting to do this and you're serious about it, using the sacraments and the plant medicines is great and amazing, and they can get you there, and they can. I don't want to say that they're a shortcut because they're not necessarily a shortcut. They're just another avenue. It's like if you're driving to, say that you're driving from, you know, uh, Los Angeles to San Francisco, you have different options of how you can get there. You have different freeways that you can take. You can take the coastal highway up, or you can take, you know, different freeways. You can take, five up, or you can drive different ways. I mean, you can drive all the way into Nevada and go up and around, all kinds of different
Yeah.
ways to get there, however you want to do it. And whatever it takes you to do to get there, it's more about the journey getting there than what got you there.
I mean, the idea that we can take all these different paths, whether it's the freeway analogy or whatever it is, however they think about, your own journey, your own travels to this place, your own evolution. It is really beautiful that there are all these ways for us to get there. And like you said, I don't think of it as a shortcut. I think a lot of people are like, I can do this thing and like I'll be there and like everything's going to make sense or whatever. And the truth is that a lot of the work with the sacraments and the plant medicines are work, right? Like it is
Oh
an
yeah.
education. It is an education and not necessarily like always a super fun one. I will also, just since we're like on the topic of on plant medicines and like sacraments and things like that, I would highly encourage people that if they are going to explore any of this, any of what we're talking about, that you work with someone that is a healer in some way, right? A true guide that has a basis in you know, some deeply rooted understanding of what's going on, because I do have some friends that have just tried different things on their own and it can go sideways. And so I think to get the most benefit out of working with these things, having somebody there that's truly there to like create the container for you, help
Hmm.
guide you through it. And then you touched on this, the integration after is so
Absolutely.
critical for people, right? Like not just having the experience and then being left and being like, am I crazy now? Like,
Right.
right? Like, what just happened to me? I was early in my journey for myself, I was like, I think I'm going crazy. I like started hearing other people's spirits talking to me. At one point I went to the grocery store and it was like during the pandemic. So I was like, I hadn't really seen a lot of people. And I went to the grocery store and I was like, I can hear everybody's spirit talking to me. And I was like, just get the sugar and get out of here, get sugar and get home. Like, whatever. I'd like run to get sugar because we were in the middle of baking and we ran out. So I was like, I'll go. And I just like I got in my car thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna be able to leave my house again. Like I'm never gonna be able to leave my house. How like what have I done to myself? I'm never gonna be able to leave. And thankfully I have like a really beautiful support system and I figured it out. But if you don't know what's going on,
Right.
you can really like feel alone. You can feel like you're going crazy. Like that integration support is just like I can't stress it enough, like how important it is to have that support system in your life so that you know you you might have those moments and like having somebody say like, oh, that's okay, you're just at this point, I've seen this happen, I've experienced this, whatever it is, right? Super.
Absolutely. Like I've had experiences, I've because of doing the show and talking about we talk about plant medicines and sacraments at different times and stuff when appropriate and stuff. So I've had the ability to talk with people who have done this on their own, who have just been like, oh, I'm going to take some mushrooms, or I'm going to try DMT, or they get a hold of some ayahuasca from someone and they take it on their own and they have no idea what they're getting into. And I've had people come back to me and be like, oh man, I had a bad trip, it was horrible, I'm never working with anything like that again. And I stop and I say, okay, well, hold on, was it a bad trip or was it something that you didn't understand? Because when I've worked with these sacraments, sometimes they will take you to a dark place. And that is where a lot of shadow work can be done, where you start to heal some of those trauma aspects and some of those, different aspects. And it can be shown to you in different manners and like parables and metaphors and visions and stuff. And so it takes that integration of having someone there that kind of knows these things, who have worked with these medicines, and understands them to be able to help people understand and integrate that in and learn that lesson that's there. And I tell a lot of people, you know, taking the medicine, once you build up the courage, because it does take courage to use a lot of these medicines, because it's, once you take it, it's there. You're you're on for the ride once you take it. But once you take it, that's the easy part. The hard part starts afterwards, when you start the integration process, where you start actually having to do the process of taking what you learned, what you heard, what you saw, what was shown to you, and putting that into work in the 3D realm.
Right. The integration, like the word integration, for me, I always thought like, okay, I need to integrate this experience in my head, and connect it with my life as it exists, right? Like integrate whatever I just experienced in.
Hmm.
But you're right, it is completely about integrating actually the dimensions together, right? Because you go to a place when you're doing this work, however you're accessing it, you're going and like retrieving information, and then it needs to be integrated into this 3D existence in some way. Like there's a reason that you're told the information that you're told. There's a reason that you are having the experiences that you're having, however you get to it, right?
Hmm.
And it's either to heal yourself and shift how you show up in the world and shift your energetic blueprint in some way, or there's some other thing that you are meant to influence and change and bring about. So somehow along the way you have to integrate that energetic information that has been gifted to you and hold it now into your own, energetic body in the environment that you create.
Absolutely. We actually have a question from the chat. They asked, they said, how did your friends and those around you react to your journey? Did you lose friends?
um did I lose friends? I don't think I've lost any friends since I started my journey. I think there's a nuance, right? Like I'm trying to think, is there anybody that was like, you know what, you're gone a little crazy? And I think that there's people that have thought that but not said it to me. That fair enough. But then there's the other element of, as you are going through your own spiritual awakening, you are shifting as a person. And so people will fall out of your life that are not in the same place as you, that are not aligned with your beliefs or, whatever it is. It's less about, so there's the like issue with maybe what you're experiencing in your reality. And then there's an issue with, well, you're just not aligned anymore. I mean, for
Right.
me, one of the things that I've had to figure out is I stopped drinking alcohol. Well, drinking alcohol was a big part of my social life. And so all of a sudden, if I'm out and with my friends and everyone's drinking and I'm like, I'm going to have a club soda or whatever, and they're like, you're not fun. Like they can't relate to me because I'm not participating. That's something that I've had to work through myself of, okay, how do I maintain those friendships without them feeling like I'm an outsider to this, thing that people are participating in. So there's definitely challenges
Right.
that you have to navigate.
And I think you're right. You know, people do kind of fall away, but that also happens just naturally through life as you grow and as you evolve and as you know, you get a different job, you start getting different interests or different hobbies. You know, some people will be like, oh, well, I'm not really into the same things that you're into now. So they're not necessarily aligned with you. So you may still be
Mhm.
friendly, you still may be civil. It might just be someone who you don't necessarily hang out with all the time now. And for me on that process, I actually met more people, and I met people that were on the same path and along the same alignment that I have become friends with along this journey. And even just through doing the show, I've met so many people that I now consider very dear friends that I just have amazing connections with on a regular basis.
I would agree. The number of people that have come into my life is exponential. Um, and the other thing I would say, add to like falling away, is that I have reached a place in my own journey where some of the people early on that were like, you are a little like odd. I'm not sure what's happening with you, what you're going through. Those people are starting to come back into my life in a really strong way where they're like, okay, I didn't understand what you were going through then, but what you are sharing and the work that you're doing in the world really resonates with me. Maybe I could use your help.
Right.
Right. So it's this really interesting thing where it's like they just weren't in a place yet to experience that. And I've learned that to honor wherever anybody is in their journey, even if it's not alongside me, like that's their path and it is perfect for them because it's their path. And just really being able to love wherever everyone is in their own processing and their own evolution.
Exactly. And you'd mentioned that, some of this was going on during the pandemic for you. And I think that that's one of the things that I've seen, because of so many people having to deal with things like lockdown and being in solitude and stuff. People have been forced to sit with themselves and start to look at themselves versus being distracted by, just the busy day-to-day life, the hustle and bustle of going to work or going to school, taking the kids, doing this, doing that. And so, in a way, one of the positive things that I've seen that's come out of this is a lot of people have really had to stop and look at themselves, and that's made them look at things in a different light. And they've started looking into things. They've started doing things like mindfulness and meditation to work on bettering themselves. And as they do that, they start diving deeper and deeper and deeper and kind of, you know, it's kind of one of those things. You're like Alice going down the rabbit hole. Once you start down this path, it's just like, oh, this this really makes sense, and now this makes sense, and now I understand that, and oh, hey, what's this over here? Let me go check this out.
I think it's the silver lining of the pandemic, right? Like there is so much. I am not, I mean, like, obviously, I would never wish the pandemic on any of us, but there is this really beautiful thing that's happening that is forcing us to slow down and take a look at ourselves and reconnect and really shed the things that don't serve us anymore. And I think that you can look at that on an individual level within ourselves each. We can look at it in terms of relationships. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have gotten divorced during the pandemic because you're like, oh my God, I have to live with this person every
Right.
single day. Is this really what I want to be doing? And a lot of families that have come, and figured out like, oh, this is really important to me. I'm not going back to working 60 hours a week and never seeing my kids and whatever, right? Like, so there's all this beautiful byproduct that's happening. And I think as we start to reintegrate into like larger societal norms, we're going to start to see how these personal, interpersonal changes that have happened, sort of behind the scenes come into play in how our culture shifts because
Right.
it will happen, right? It's just waiting to see like how does that actually manifest in terms of who you go and spend time with and how does the workplace come back to being face to face and what's the priority and it's going to be a different world and it will be a better one, um especially with how much personal change has taken place. I think, a lot of people don't recognize, um, possibly within themselves, but definitely don't recognize at a societal level.
Right. And that's and that's one of the things I have seen is there's people that have, obviously there's some people that just totally completely missed any getting any of that. There's some people it's like, okay, well I can just binge Netflix, or spend all my time on Facebook, on social media and stuff, and they found other ways to distract themselves. But those that took that time to do some of that looking at themselves, and started to dive deeper into this, they're still really early in this journey, and the impacts that we're going to see from that really haven't started to ripple out yet. This is just the impact of the pebble into the pond, and we haven't seen the ripples start to come out to the edges yet, and we're going to see that as time goes on. And I think what we're going to lead into is people having more awareness and more compassion, and you see that in different levels. You see a lot more compassion starting to come out now. You see people starting to look at life differently, and especially anyone who lost a loved one during this time frame, and the ways that things were handled and stuff, not being able to be by that person's side, or not being able to have, um a funeral service or a memorial service for them because of things going on, and how things were handled, has really impacted a lot of people to looking at things differently, and how we operate as a society. And I think it's started to kind of bring communities together, to bring families together, to bring some of that closeness together. And in a way, it's almost like a reemergence of some of that old tribal culture and connection that's starting to come out, where a lot of these things were developed out of.
Yeah. There's a craving for that, right? And I think that we've seen for years that there's a craving for community,
Hmm.
right? With I mean, even social networks came out of a desire for community. They morphed into whatever they are today, but that innate human need for community, to find your tribe, um it exists, and I think that that is coming to the forefront of society. It's how we actually hold on to that idea, and then are we able to take that idea and really put it into practice? So like, how strong are we as humans, individuals, collective, to have that be the change, right? That we want to see, and how do we execute that in a way and integrate, right? Like if you imagine the pandemic being just like one big ceremony where people are really diving in and looking at themselves, we're coming into that place of integration where
Right.
you have to take all of that learning, all of that change, all of that growth, and now integrate it into a structure, a society that is, you know, still very much how it used to be. So how do we like bring those two things in a graceful way?
Right. And that's what's really important about the kind of work that you do, and others that have been on the show and stuff are doing, and working with, and even the show, because it brings these things to the forefront where people can go, hey, I don't really know how to do this. Let me, most people like, let me Google this, or let me go look it up
Yeah.
on YouTube, or let me go find this out somewhere on the internet where I can find a direction to head in. And so when they stumble across things like this show, or they come across your website, or they're searching on Amazon for a book about something, and they come across someone's book, and they get that information, it allows them to have a point to make connections with other people, so that they start to find that tribe that they're part of. And it's really unique, because there's something really, really special about the way everything's going with the internet, because of the aspect that we can connect with anyone across the globe. And so people are finding, hey, this person that lives over in India, or this person that lives in England, or this person that lives in Canada, or Australia, or wherever, we have a connection. We are part of a community. We are part of a tribe. And so they're connecting together, and they're talking, and they're discussing ideas, and getting deeper into things, and they're getting involved in different aspects, and really starting to look at the way that we have functioned as a society differently.
Absolutely. I think what's so lovely about the internet, right, and being able to find other people's stories, other people's information, how they've dealt with a situation or situations they've encountered, is that it illuminates just another piece of the possibilities that exist for somebody, right? So
Hmm.
like you're saying, like it allows you to connect those dots, and it's like when I read other people's stories, when I have conversations with people, I just feel like my realm of what's possible in this existence, or like any existence in the multiverse, increases a little bit, because even though it's not necessarily an experience I have, all of the sudden I'm like, oh, but that is possible. I
Right.
could have that experience. I might, maybe it's not the right experience for me in my trajectory in my journey. Great. I can set that aside. Or maybe that really is the right experience for me. And then how does that come into my life? How do I call that into my life in a way that is, gentle and seamless, right? So it's this
Absolutely.
interesting patchwork of like illuminating what the realm of possibility is for others.
Well, and that's kind of the whole purpose of why I even put this show together, was to show different perspectives so people can challenge themselves to look at things differently, so they can see things, so they can look at their own reality and realize this isn't all that there is.
Yeah.
Because like growing up, until I hit 15 years old, and that, had that first book and had that first experience, you know, I was I grew up in Southwest Ohio and the Bible Belt of the Midwest, and it was, I grew up in a full gospel, non-denominational Christian church. We went to church at least 3 times a week. And, it was read the Bible, believe the Bible, listen to the pastor, listen to what they say, and, do what they say to do. And that was reality. But to me, I'm like, there's something more. This isn't it.
Yeah.
There's something more. And like I grew up in these churches, and um I had like we would have like different preachers, or different evangelists that were traveling through, or they had people that they would call prophets coming through and stuff, and they would prophesy over top of me that I was meant to become a powerful man of God. And this was something I was told from the time I mean, from when some of the youngest memories I have was that, and my mother saying that it was ordained because I was adopted into the family that I'm in, that it was ordained that I was put in this family, and that I was meant to become a man of God, and I was supposed to learn through this family and through the teachings and stuff they was given. And so, when I was young and growing up and hearing all that, I thought, oh God, this is what I've got to do. I've got to, I got to look at, going to seminary, becoming a pastor or a preacher, and getting a church, and doing this and doing that. And this is my path. And then but none of what I was doing along that path felt right for me. It didn't fulfill me. And it wasn't until I started that journey at age 15, with those experiences, that it kicked off something different, and it showed me different avenues and different paths to look at. And so I started studying. I started looking at everything I could. I started studying different religions of the world. I started looking at different things, and I started seeing things from a different perspective. I stopped seeing the world through the lens that my family had tried to put on me, and started looking at it through a different aspect, in a different way. And that really opened me up through those studies. if I had tried to continue on the path that my family said, I would have never read those books. I would have never had that experience of the peyote ceremony with the elders and stuff that started this journey. I would have never picked up that Sandra Ingram book on shamanic journeying and started to learn and experience that and dive deeper into all of this. I would have just went to seminary, and probably would be living a fairly unfulfilled life, just kind of going through the motions and doing what they said. And I even tried it. I even tried going back and doing that because it's what I was told I was supposed to do. So I went back and I became a youth pastor at age 19 for a church, and then that didn't feel right. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this is the wrong church. I'll go find a different one and I'll try it there.
Yeah.
And I became an associate youth pastor at another church. And I was like 23, 24 at the time, and I'm just like, no, this just is not cutting it. This is not. And during this whole time, I was still, looking into other things, and I was looking at different aspects, and I was reading and studying other things, but I was still trying to live the life that I was told by my family that I was supposed to do. And it just didn't fit. And it wasn't until I really just said, you know what, I'm going to start living my truth, that things really started to fall together.
Feel like you're a man of God? Do you feel like that prophecy has come to fruition?
Absolutely. My mother passed back in December, and I remember sitting down at the table with her late October, early November, and I told her, because she had brought up those prophecies, and she said, "Oh, you're going on down the wrong path. Your spiritual beliefs and everything are way off mark, and you need to get back with God. You need to get Jesus in your life, and you need to do this." I told her, I said, "Mom," I said, "first off, you don't understand my spiritual path." And I said, "Second of all," I said, "I have become the man of God that I was prophesied to be. It's just not what you thought it was going to be. It is a different view. It is a different way. And I see things differently. Like, I don't discount a lot of the things that I learned growing up, and I think there's a lot of good teachings and a lot of good lessons to be learned in the Bible. And I've got my Bible right here. I've got a Strong's Concordance for studying and stuff. This is actually my mother's that she used to have. And I dive deep into the scriptures a lot of times for different things, for teachings and stuff. And if you go back and you watch some of the episodes, there's a lot of times that the Judeo-Christian scriptures are brought up as a basis for some of the teachings and stuff that we talk about, because they've got some good foundations of things in there. But that wasn't all for me, and like, as I started diving in and learning things and learning stuff about, like, say, the chakras and how energy work goes and stuff along those lines, oh man, coming from my family, you're messing with demons, you're messing with darkness, that's devils and evil stuff. And I'm like, no, you guys,
Powerful,
I'm
right?
like, first off, have you guys ever looked into this at all? And there, or is this just what you've heard someone stand behind a pulpit and preach?
Is this, beautiful irony of church, right? Of religion, that I believe all of those religions are rooted in the same thing that you and I are talking about today, right? That
Oh, yeah.
place beyond the 3D. However, humans come on top of that, and there is this power struggle that has to ensue because we live in this dualistic place. And so it's the dogma that sits on top of the true teachings and the beliefs and the message that I think all of those religions were trying to convey. That sometimes I go back, I was raised Catholic, and so sometimes I go back to those teachings and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so obvious. Like,
Right.
I'm just laughing to myself because I'm like, oh, this is what they were trying to tell us, like, that's what that scripture means, or like, this is what that story's all about, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I would have never gotten that unless I had done this, whole journey and come full circle back to that to have that really deep understanding of what it is they were actually trying to tell you in code.
Right.
That's not really code at all. It's there.
Well, I mean, if you look at the New Testament, Jesus spoke in parables all the time.
Yeah.
He didn't flat out say, "Hey, this is what it is, guys, and this is how it is," because he says those of you that are spiritually minded will already know this. Those of
Mhm.
you who are approaching these things with a spiritual mind will understand this. Those of you who are not will have to learn this.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process. So he spoke in parables. He didn't just come out and say, "Okay, guys, this is what I really meant to say."
Yeah. Well,
It,
it's how we as humans are able to consume information too, right? So often when we're talking to other people and trying to teach them something, we use a metaphor, we use a
yep.
story, we're trying to use an example so that our brains as humans can actually understand the concept in some way and have it grounded in our current reality, right? So in order to break through our current reality, it has to be anchored somewhere in this reality to wrap your head around it. And I think Jesus's use of parable is so like obvious to me as a teaching device for people
Hmm.
because that's how we learn as humans.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that, like I've seen people that'll be like, "Oh, well, you study Hindu religions, or you've studied Islam, or you've looked into these
Hmm.
different things." That's wrong. That's evil. And I'm like, have you ever picked up the Quran and read it, or have you just listened to what someone else has to say about it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it,
That first party, that first person information knowledge gathering is so important, especially now with the internet where, you know, who knows where some of the information came from. But yeah, being able to go to like a primary resource to learn something is so powerful.
right. And that's one of the things I challenge people in is if you really question something, and like I was even sitting down the other day, spending some time with my father, and he brought up about some of the stuff that's going on in the world today with some of the Islamic extremists and stuff, and he was just he but he wasn't talking about the extremist. He was just kind of slamming the Islamic beliefs across the board.
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, "Dad, I said, first off, you need to stop right there." I said, there's extremists in every belief, and those extremists are the ones that get dangerous. That those are the ones that take things to bad points. And I said, if you really want to get into it, I said there's a lot of Christian extremists that do a lot of horrible things,
Mhm.
and they do a lot of bad things. I mean, if you look at like the Aryan Nation, a lot of them claim to be Christian. They claim to be following Christ, and they are one of the largest hate groups out there. I mean, they just they hate, you know with a passion. And I told Dad, I said, I know people who are Muslim, who follow the Islamic faith, and they're some of the nicest people I have ever met. They're some of the most loving, compassionate, caring people I have ever met. And then if you really want to dive into it, and Dad always hates when I bring this up, I said, look at the mystics in every religion. I said, look at
Mhm.
the Islamic mystics, look at the Sufis,
Yeah.
look at the way the Sufis approach things.
Yeah.
They approach the Sufi belief is, if it is not done in love, it is not done in the name of Allah. And
Mhm.
people will hear Allah and be like, "Oh my God, that's another God." No, it's the Islamic word for God.
Yeah.
It's not another God. They're not talking about some other deity. That's the name for God in their language. And that's one of those things that I try to teach people, try to show people. And it's just how that's just an example of how people get so wrapped up in different things within this 3D world that they don't see the connections between all these things beyond this.
Yeah. I mean, I think of all of the gods, right? Like when you look at all the religion and around the world and through different time, um, all of that is just humans trying to wrap their head around the concept of God or source or, like
Hmm.
whatever that thing is, it's the same thing. It was humans coming up with labels and constructs to help us be able to process something that's not really something that you can process. It's not something that is easily put into words or described or understood.
Right.
And right, it's like whoever at the time that was talking about it and teaching it, that was their best effort, and like I can appreciate that, and I can also understand that, okay, all these things are trying to describe something that's not describable.
Right. I mean, like if you take the story of Jesus and then you go and you look at the story of Osiris and Horus in the Egyptian beliefs, very very similar storyline right there. Very very similar. There's some differences, but very very similar. And
Yeah.
and the time frame that those tales were told were different time frames. And while the Egyptians were still around and having holding those beliefs during the time of Christ, those stories were being told through different viewpoints and different cultures. And the way I look at things is when you really get back to the heart of it, all these things really point to a very, very similar path. And it's just going through the cultural lens of wherever those people are at. I mean, let's look at Christ. He was nailed on the cross and hung on the cross. Let's look at Odin in the Norse mythology. He hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, to gain knowledge and wisdom that he could bring back to people so he could gift this to those that he was over top of, so he could bring this knowledge and wisdom back to him.
Yeah. And if you really think about it, when we like back to our earlier conversation around sacraments and plant medicine, a lot of those things ultimately are facilitating an ego death, right?
Yes.
So that you can die, like so many other examples, go to the other side and come back and bring knowledge for yourself and for others so that you can, live in the kingdom of God, right? Like I had
Right.
this moment in my journey where I was like, "Oh my gosh, we are actually living in heaven on earth," right? Like, and I had a whole period where I was like, "Okay, I'm living on heaven on earth." I just like, was giddy. I don't even know how to describe it. And I, told my husband's like, "Okay, so you're a little out of touch. There's all this shit happening. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic and, like all these people are dying." I was like, "You don't understand. We are living, it's heaven on earth, like this whole thing." And, he had a really hard time wrapping his head around what I was trying to say, but really it was like we each have to go through our own journey of
Hmm.
that like ego death or whatever that is, come back and be able to experience what it's like to live in this like really beautiful place and appreciate everything that we have, right? Like so often a lot of like the teachings are about like sitting in gratitude, and I'm like, yes, because if you can sit in gratitude for everything that's happening, whether that is positive, whether it's a challenge in your life, whether it's something that appears really bad, if you can sit in gratitude for it and not judge in the moment whether it's good or bad for you and for other people, and just let that pass through, then you will get to a place where you have perspective and you understand what role that played. And
Right.
like I of course have tons of empathy for people that really are struggling, but I also really believe that there's a way through that that allows you to reach a place of grace for yourself and for other people, that allows you to live in this sort of energetic place that is very light. And I think there's a like deep, deep understanding that all of this is happening for reasons beyond what I can understand, right? Like I've let go of that ego that I am knowledgeable enough to understand everything that's going on. I just don't. I don't. I'm okay with that finally, that I don't understand why things happen, and I just have really deep faith and trust that they're happening for a beautiful end result that
Right.
I
Well,
don't
I
know.
mean, to start off on what you was talking about there, part of it is, it says the kingdom of heaven is found within.
Mhm.
It's not some place that is, in some mystical zone that we're going to go to. The
Yeah.
kingdom of heaven is meant to be found within us.
Mhm.
And that's where we find that. Just on the opposite side, we can also create our own personal hells too within us. And when someone is going through something, when someone's going through a trauma or crisis or something, and like I've even experienced this with dealing with the abdominal hernia that I've got and stuff. I've been in and out of the emergency room with it. Having to go in and get help getting it reduced, going in and when working with the doctors and stuff. And I've had some really bad times. I was in there just probably about a month and a half ago, and it was bad enough that they brought the on-call surgeon in. They thought they was going to have to take me into emergency surgery.
Mm.
But in all that, I sat there and I was asking myself, what is the lesson that I need to learn here? What is going on that I need to learn? And I have learned during this whole process, even during the worst pains that's going on with it, to sit in gratitude and love.
Mhm.
And knowing that, one, this will come to an end, that I can endure it, that I can get through it, that, there is an end to this. I've got an appointment date set up to see a surgeon to get the surgery taken care of, to get it, everything resolved. And all the process, there's been a lot of times because of this, because I haven't been able to go out and do things to distract myself and stuff, that I've
Mhm.
been forced to sit in that reflective state more, that I've been
Mhm.
forced to sit in the meditation more. And a lot of times when I'm laying on a gurney in the emergency room trying to deal with this, I'm I'm dropping myself into a meditative state to try to control my breathing, to try to control, make sure I keep the anxieties under control, because any of that stuff makes it worse. So I'm learning how to control all of those things within myself even more at a better level than what I had done previously. So I'm
Yeah.
learning things within this. I'm learning how to go deeper. I'm learning how to go deeper within myself, even when I'm in the point of, you know, a crisis or a trauma. I'm learning that I need to not panic and react in such negative ways. And it's like last week I hurt my back and pulled a muscle on my back, and I told someone I was talking to the next day, I said the old me would have been like, oh man, when it rains it pours. It just, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? I'm already dealing with one issue. Why am I dealing with this now on top of it? And I was like, but to me, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to get up and move around nearly as well, so I'm going to have to work within my limitations that I've got.
Yeah.
And so it taught me to be able to look at things differently, how to handle things differently, how to do things differently. Sometimes I had to reach out and ask for help from someone who I may not necessarily have felt comfortable reaching out and asking for help. But at this point in
Mhm.
time, I needed it, and I needed to learn to humble myself to ask them for that and say, hey,
Yeah.
I really don't want to come to you for this, but I really need this. Can you help me out?
Yeah, totally. I think each of our experiences, whether they're really beautiful experiences or traumatic ones or challenges in our life, ultimately are just increasing our capacity for that gratitude and love, right? Like if you think about anything that you've gone through that's challenging, when you come out the other side, you somehow have the ability to have a little bit more gratitude, a little bit more patience, a little bit more love in your life for the people that helped you, for yourself, for, all of these things. We had a family member pass away last year unexpectedly, and quite suddenly. And, I had to go through my own process of how do I view this in my like new belief system? Having something tragic happen. And I kept saying to my husband and And my sister's like, okay, this is not like what I would wish for. Again, like not what I would wish for, but we're in this situation and I can see how much love was generated from the loss of this family member, from the loss of this person. I was like, I love each of you a little bit more. I appreciate them a little bit more. I have more gratitude that they're alive and in my life, and I have that capacity was actually, expanded through the loss of this other person. And by the way, even though I loved him very much, the person that passed away, I'm like, I have so much more knowledge, gratitude, appreciation, deep caring for him now that I know so much more about him, right? Because I knew him as, a family member and like
Right.
that relationship. I didn't know him as a college roommate or a best friend or, a coworker or all of these other things that he was to people, a mentor, a teammate, like all those things. But with his passing, I got to actually experience him through all those other people. And so my knowledge of just how much love there is also expanded, right? So again, it's not like I would wish this upon our family or somebody else's family, but being able to tie those experiences to that expansion, at least for me, helps me process through the challenging times and the losses because I can really start to say, like, okay, this is the path of human existence. It is to figure out how we can expand this gratitude and love that is so critical to the universe working and like existing in the way that it's meant to. So if that's my job to experience these things and like grow and expand out a little bit more, I'm totally willing to do that.
Right. Right. And I seen a lot of similar things through the passing of my mother. And we lost her right before Christmas. And so and that was always a really big holiday for her. Really big holiday. She would decorate the house, everything, and it was one of those things that I saw my family come together in a way that we really hadn't in a long time. And it was a way that the family rallied behind dad and supported dad. And then the way dad said, I'm going to do this because this is what she would have wanted done. We're not going to stop our gatherings or our traditions and stuff. We're going to do these things in a way to honor her. And that's a lot of what's happened. And it's been really interesting seeing how the family dynamic has changed without her there, because she really was the spiritual leader for the family. And she when she left, there's been a void there. And so it's kind of made everyone have to look at their own personal journey in a different way. And I was always the black sheep in the family because of my belief system. I've always been kind of on the fringe with it. But it was interesting because some of the family even stopped and took a little bit of notice of what I was doing and how I was handling it, because I was dealing with things in a different manner than what they was, because of my journey, because of my path, because of my understanding of what death means and what comes after death, and what all these different aspects of life mean.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. So, um, one of my like gifts that turned on in my journey was that I channel. And I normally tap into like people's higher self, their energy, but as you talked about that, I mean, just like a couple of things came through that I'll share with you. One, like there was some message around like how it's forcing your family to become the glue, like to, as you were saying, like your mom was sort of like the glue that kept the family intact. And there was like this sort of image that came through around like everybody turning into like the glued stick to the next person. So like imagine your family in a circle and they're just like sticking all side by side together in the circle, which was really like humorous and like makes a lot of sense, right? It's like a
Right.
coming together of the family, like you were saying. Um, and yeah, I mean, just like this image of her looking down and being really proud of like you guys doing things in her honor and like that appreciation of that definitely came through. So I just like I love that you guys are in that place where you can bond
Yeah, and I
and
mean
like
it's had its challenges and stuff, and there's been
yeah
issues with it as well. There's been some arguments and stuff that's went back and forth different ways among certain members of the family and stuff, and there's been some division that's come through it. But it's weird because in that division, family members that I may have not talked to hardly at all are reaching out to me, going, "Hey, why are they doing this? What's going on?" I don't understand why so and so is saying this, or why this happened. And so it's opening up avenues to discuss things and to get deeper in things. And one of the things that I came to a conclusion with it is, okay, well, mom has passed and she's on the other side. She now understands what I was talking about to her. She she under
station.
she understands that it's not as different as what she thought it was. That my beliefs and her beliefs, while looked at through a different lens, really wasn't all that different at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, there's this moment I think when we pass where everything makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Like when you pass through the veil and like everything that's ever happened in every part of existence just like clicks into place and you're like, "Oh, I have an engineering background, so I really like everything to be logical." Which is like a really unfortunate desire given that I'm, you know, mostly spend most of my time in like the spiritual realm and like
Hmm.
trying to figure out what is going on and nothing is linear. And so it's really this beautiful moment when I pass through the veil where I'm like, oh, here's how all of the pieces fit together so divinely perfectly. Like, of course it's this beautiful thing that looks like chaos but is actually perfection and very logical.
Right. And see, I kind of come from a similar path because I operate with a very analytical mind a lot of times, where I will analyze something and I will break it down. And if it doesn't make sense, I got to figure out why, what's going
Hmm.
on, what's wrong, where's it at. And I actually was going into the field of psychology, and then I ended up totally completely swaying away from it because as I got deeper into studying psychology, I just went, you know, this just isn't really where I need to be. This isn't going to be something that's going to fulfill me. It's not going to make me happy. I don't agree with some of the ways that I was being told that if I was going to be an accredited psychologist that I had to operate within, and it just didn't make sense to me. And so I said, all right, I analyzed that, out the door with it. Let's go see what's next on the path. And it's led me to where I'm at now, doing what I'm doing now. But I do come at things at times with a very analytical mind. In my early 20s, I had um a spiritual mentor that was there, and a good friend of mine. He just looked at me. He told me, he said, Josh, he said, you have to stop analyzing every aspect of everything. Just step out in faith. Just step
Yeah.
out and trust that things are going to work out, that things are going to come together. You don't have to analyze this and break it down piece by piece and understand every aspect of it. You don't have to understand everything for it to be true.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, for me, one of the breakthroughs from that state of anxiety was just letting go of the idea that I could know everything, right? Because I think coming from that engineering background, if you know all the variables and you know how it's supposed to fit together, you can make it work. And if one variable is out of alignment, you can just tune some things because you have a really clear understanding of the whole picture of how everything's supposed to work. And I applied that to my life. So I was like, if I just know what's going on in every single, nanosecond of my life, my kid's life, my husband's life, my friend's life, like I can piece everything together and then make it work. Right. And I think that led me to this false belief that I could just force it to work instead of
Right.
just sitting back and being like, there's no way that I, as like one human being, am going to know everything that's going to happen, every possible scenario, and account for that. So if I just like sit back and don't have to deal with any of that, and then as stuff comes up, just know that there's some like reason for it. There's trusting, there's that faith that like it will all work out, whatever twist and turn, I encounter, and being much more flexible in my life. Now I'm like, oh, okay, I definitely have moments where I have anxiety and I panic. But most of the time I'm like, cool, there's like this really unfortunate like left turn in my plans. All right, I will just like bob and weave with that and figure it out. And it probably is because I'm avoiding like having a tree fall on me as I walk down the street if I took that other path, right? Like
Right.
I just always go to like, well, it means that like that other path probably would have killed me. Like, and that helps me get through it because I'm like, yes, if I have, worst case scenario on that other path and this is diverting me, then that's great.
Right. Well, it's like one of the things for me. I had some traumatic things happen when I was younger, and I always question, well, why did God allow this to happen? Why did these things happen to me? Why did I have to endure this? And I would break it down, and I would question this, and I would scream at the sky, and angry shaking fist and yelling at God, what's your problem, and just but it was one of those things that as time went on, I learned lessons from those things. I learned how to work through those traumas. I learned how to heal from those traumas, that now when I face others that are dealing with similar things and are lost within that, they don't know, I can be the light to show them a way. And while I can't necessarily heal them, I can help them along their path. I can be a beacon for them so that they can find their way through this as well, which I think is really what is a key factor for a healer is we are there to show the person that you can heal and you can do this yourself. We're just the beacon to help you along the way. We're there to show you the
Yeah.
path. We can't walk it for you, but we can be there with you for support, for strength. We can show you some of the things that maybe you're not seeing because you're lost in your own darkness, and we can stand next to you and be a light that will allow you to see and illuminate the things that you need to see so that you can walk along your own path through your own healing and through your own journey and get to where you need to be.
Percent. And I think for me, in my practice, I always just have such gratitude for the people that I'm able to work with because I feel like it is the biggest honor to be able to witness somebody else and their journey and their growth and their own navigation through the darkness, right? Or
Absolutely.
even when they're in the light and the iterations and the evolutions and the levels that they're accessing, right? Like getting to see other people experience that is one of the things that brings me the most joy in life. I know it's like it's a little bit weird, but I'm always like anytime I'm feeling a little down, I'm like I just needed a session with a client so that I get to see how beautiful this process really is, and I am like super happy after every session I do with a client because it is just the most beautiful process for people to go through an experience when you're looking at it from the other side, from
Right.
the other side of the like messy darkness. When you're in that spot where you're like, life is really messed up and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. And I don't know how you deal with it. And you're crazy because you're so positive. I'm like, yes, I understand where you are. And it will be so much more beautiful when you come to the other side because you'll have that perspective, you'll have that appreciation. So, like you were saying, I just have a lot of gratitude for those times where I was really depressed and did have a lot of anxiety because I have so much more gratitude for the joy and happiness that I'm able to feel now.
Right. It's I have a someone that's close to me that went through some addiction issues, and when they worked through those issues and they worked through their healing process and they worked through all of this, they started to see that they had the ability to be able to help others, and now they have went through training and they have gotten certifications and stuff and are working towards becoming an addiction counselor to help
Mhm.
others work through that process. And the thing is, you know, someone that hasn't been there, yes, they can help someone through that process, but not necessarily the same as someone who has stood in that same place. You know, someone who
Yeah.
has been through those similar addiction
Mhm.
problems or those similar traumas where they can go, hey, you know, I've stood in the same place that you're at right now. I have felt exactly how you're feeling, that I'm just lost to everything, that nothing in the world makes sense, and you know, nothing else matters but that next fix that's going to allow them to escape, you know, the reality of that trauma and that pain that they're suffering.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they can tell them, hey, you know, I know that there's a way beyond this. I can show you the path if you're willing to walk it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so often we hear your mess is your medicine, right? Your
Yep.
mess is your message. It's what we have healed within ourselves. And there's always somebody just, like a little bit behind you on the path that you're walking, and there's someone a little bit ahead of you on the path. And that's how it works, right? There's always somebody that is experiencing a very similar thing to you that you can teach or learn from. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, back to like that concept of finding our tribe, it's so important because when you find your tribe, you find that support system and you find a way to give back and contribute and support others. And so it's all that like spiral, that beautiful spiral of life, of evolution, of helping others and of expanding that grace and love that I just think is so beautiful. Even in the dark times, right?
Right. And the thing about that spiral, when you look at the spiral and stuff, and the way that it's used in a lot of spiritual teachings, is you will keep coming back around to that same lesson until you learn it, and then when you learn it is when you come out of that spiral. And when you
Mhm.
come out of it, you know, each time you come around, you learn a little more, you learn a little more, you learn a little more, and you get away from that center core towards, you know, escaping away from it, and getting out of that trauma. But it takes time. You've got to go around that spiral. You've got to walk that path. You've got to learn those lessons. And you know, right when you're in it immediately, you're in such a crisis state that you can't even see that there's a lesson to be learned. And I know a lot of people are, you know, they'll not look at something and say, oh well, okay, I'm enduring this hardship because of this. Well, I'm I tell you, there's something to be learned there in all of our hardships and all of our traumas and stuff. And um, you know, there's another one of the guests, Darren McGavin, that was on. He said, "My traumas are my blessings," is what
Yeah, I
he
love
says.
that.
You know, he said, you know, without my traumas that I went through, I would not have the skill set and the ability to help the other people like I do today. And he said, I show them that they can come through this because I came through it. I show them that they can heal from this because I healed from it.
Yeah, it's so true. So, so true. And I think, when we're talk about the spirals and we talk about the three-dimensional world, right? You're in the spiral when you're in the three-dimensional world. But there's this beautiful place up above those spirals where you can see, like, oh my God, I'm this person walking on this
Mm-hmm.
spiral path, right? And I think that that's so, so beautiful because when you're able to access that place where you are just like looking down and have the perspective of like almost like all these spirals all around that people are walking, it gives you, I mean, that is a really easy way to access beyond the 3D, right? It's like just close your eyes and imagine what it would be like to be above that and look down. And then what is the path that those people are taking? What advice would you give that person when you're up in sort of overview state looking down, like if you're having a hard time meditating or accessing, through whatever means, I always go to that place of like, okay, how do I just move away from this and get better perspective on it to be able to get that insight? And when you're able to step away, I feel like you just have a little bit more access to your intuition, into your spirit, into that like divine guidance, or, even secularly, just like you have more perspective
Mm-hmm.
in like scientific terms.
Right.
So, however you're approaching it, like that's a really beautiful method to just literally pop out, assess the situation, ask what if you need, and like pop back in.
Right. And sometimes it's stepping away from that situation and looking at it from a different perspective that gives you that aha moment of, oh, okay, this all makes sense now. I understand. Let me go back and do this again. I know the way to handle this now. I know the way to fix this, and it's when you get so deep into the problem that you're staring at it so close that you're not seeing the big picture of everything that's going on. And sometimes you just, like you said, you got to step back and look at it fully. It's like if you're trying to solve put a puzzle together, but you're so locked in on one piece, you don't see the other pieces that fit in around it so that that piece makes sense.
I love the puzzle analogy or metaphor for life, right? Like all of these things that are happening, they're just building this puzzle that we don't know what the picture is. We don't know what
Right.
we're building. We just know that all these pieces are falling into place in life. And some of them feel like they don't belong. But then when you are finished, at the end of our life, we're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, that puzzle is really beautiful. This is
Right.
what the picture is.
Right. It's like picking up a piece of the puzzle though and getting so locked on trying to figure out where that piece goes, but you haven't put the other pieces in place around it so that it fits into place. And so you got to step back and kind of let some of those other things fall into place so that it then makes sense.
Completely. It's holding on to those metaphors. It's holding on to those, you know, for Jesus, the parables, right? Like
Right.
the stories of our life that unlock sort of that freedom that I think we're all seeking.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that, if anyone out there right now is just really questioning where you're at in your journey and stuff, step back and try to look at it from a different perspective, or reach out to someone and talk to them and ask them what their perspective on things are, and try to look at it from how they see things, because sometimes you can really figure out a lot just by talking to the people around you and seeing what they see as well, because they look at things from a different perspective as yourself. And sometimes you just get so wrapped up in your own personal issues, your own personal problems, you can't see beyond them to see the solution to them. You're just wrapped up with the problem, with the issue, and you can't see that there's a path out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so true in every respect, right? It's true for really basic human conflict and emotion, and it's true for like as deep a spiritual place as you want to take it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. But so we got about 20 minutes left in the show. Is there I know you've got a book coming out, or is it released yet? If you would like to talk about that and talk about some of the other things along that path before we wrap up the show. And if anybody has any questions, please ask, and I'll relay them over.
I love questions. But yeah, have coming out September 9th is the release date. It is available for pre-order on Amazon, but it really is the journey of my own transformation. So I was, living my life that I had spent, up until that point. My whole focus in life was to build a career, to, find my soulmate and have a beautiful family. And I had done all of those things. And I looked around and realized, like, oh shit, this, I'm not happy. And I have all of the outer exterior things that should indicate that I would be a really happy person. There's something wrong. And that something wrong is probably me. So how do I fix this? How do I like dive into this and figure it out? And so I really, with no really understanding of spirituality, or I had always said, like, I'm not religious, I'm a spiritual person. And I didn't really know what that meant. And I had said, like, I don't know what that means, but I know that that's true. And so I set out on a journey to figure out who I was. And I read books and I, had a lot of twists and turns in my journey. And ultimately, a shaman like literally drop in my lap. I mean, not literally fall into my lap, but I wasn't looking for them.
Right.
I wasn't looking for them.
Came into your path.
Like they literally fell into my life, but not actually physically as a human. But I was connected with this shaman, and I was like, yeah, I would love to meet with you. Like, I'm totally open to this, and I know that I need to deal with some of the trauma from my childhood. So that person said, great, it's not going to be for a couple of months. And I was like, oh, well, maybe we could do it sooner than a couple months out. I have this trip to the Grand Canyon that I'm going on. It feels like this would be aligned before I go and spend, 11 days rafting the Grand Canyon. So they said, okay, let me fit you in. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Like, I literally was just like, no idea that I was stepping into like such a sacred space. I just didn't know anything about shamanism at that point in my life. I didn't know really anything about spirituality or what was possibly beyond the 3D. And had just an amazing experience with the shaman. And that really kicked my journey into like overdrive. And I had a really intense couple of years where I was working with them to, for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I need to understand the next chapter of this story. And
Right.
It's so funny because I had no intentions of writing a book at all. But I kept saying, my friends and my family would be like, why do you keep going? Like, what is happening here? Why is this like such an intense thing happening for you? And I was like, I don't know, but it's like, imagine if you're reading a book and you're left with a cliffhanger. You just need to know the next chapter. Right. And so I used to say that all the time. And then here we are now, written the book of my experience. And really the intention of putting it out there in the world is to just share my story, hopefully to help somebody that might be feeling alone feel a little less alone, to shine a light on what is possible for people out there. Not that you need to follow in my footsteps on my own path, but to just be aware that this is possible is, I think, a really powerful place to be.
Absolutely. I actually have the PDF of it on my desktop right now. If it is the same cover and title and everything there, is that what's going to be released?
I have a previous version. So some typos have been corrected since you got that copy, but yeah, essentially it's the same version.
Would you mind if I showed just what the cover of that looks like so people can see what it is and the name of it and everything? Okay, let me pop this up, guys. This should just come up on the screen for everyone to see. It's Return to the Light Within, How I Woke Up, Rediscovered Who I Am, and Found Happiness. So that's the book there. So feel free. You said that's going to be available on Amazon on September 9th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm really excited for people to read it. I mean, I set out when I wrote the book. I was working with my editor and he was like, okay, you need to set a goal for yourself about what you want to do with this book. And I said, great. My my goal is to have one person read the book. Shit. And he was like, what? He was
Yeah.
like, no, 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 you need a goal. And I was like, yeah, but how can we, I mean, I come from the world of engineering and analytics, so I want to be able to measure everything. And I said, well, my goal is to have 100 people then finish the book. And he was like, wait, like our goals are in cells. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't matter to me. What
Yeah.
matters to me is how many people actually read the content. So he's
I was the
like,
same way
I
when
think he's still struggling.
I was the same way when I started the show. Someone said, "Well, what's your goal with the show?" I said, "Well, if one person listens to the show and it helps them in some way, shape, or form, then every bit of work, everything that I put into it has been achieved." And then one of the guys who was working with me said, "No, no, no. You need to think bigger. You need to think bigger. What is your long term goals with the show?" And I'm like, to help that one person. If it helps more, that's just more, that's just extra icing on the cake. That's just taking it beyond.
Yeah.
If this affects one person and helps one person understand something better than what they did, or helps them find their healing process or their journey, then every bit of work, every episode. I This is episode 39 of this run of the show. I done 8 episodes previously on Blog Talk Radio. So, out of all those episodes, if one of those reaches someone, then it's achieved its goal.
And people think you're like not telling the truth, but it really is true, because I know that I would have appreciated reading my book when I was going through my stuff, and I read a lot of other people's books. So I have an idea of what's out there, and I just really wanted to share the like deep details of my experiences in the shamanic ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
And there definitely is some places where there's plant medicine, and there's a lot of places where I'm not using plant medicine, but really helping people understand, like, okay, you can go do a shamanic drumming ceremony and be taken to a place that is so far beyond anything that I thought was possible or could be real, that um if I had read that and known that somebody else had experienced that, I think me going into the experience would have been a little bit more comfortable and probably a little bit more graceful than my like rocky entry and rocky exit
Right.
of
And
some of the information.
just a little more open minded with the understanding of it. And like you
Yeah.
said, things like going into a drumming circle, a shamanic drumming ceremony, or one of the guests that's here, in one of the viewers that's here in the channel will agree with me, doing a sweat lodge. One of my brothers is here. Not a biological brother, but a spiritual brother is in the chat as well, and he'll understand that. He's worked with a lot of sweat lodges and stuff, and the power that a sweat lodge can have, going into that ceremony with it, and what that can do, the impact that can have, the impact that can change a person. And, if we share these stories with others, then they may go, well, hey, maybe I'll try a sweat lodge if I get the opportunity. And they can go into it with maybe a little more peace of mind at what's going on, so they can actually try to dive into it deeper than what they may have been if they went in with a lot of apprehension or anxiety or nervousness around doing something like that.
I mean, I found, especially, I have done advanced readers with several people, and the people that have had experiences that have read the book are like, oh, okay, so I had this experience and now I have some context for what that really means. Or there's benefits to both sides. People that haven't had experiences that are interested, and people that have had experiences that are just, looking for context. I know for myself, I'm always interested in hearing someone's journey. I'm so
Right.
curious about, how everybody experiences whatever is beyond, because I know I only have a slice of it and I know that there is so much more. So I'm always up for reading that sort of content, that, having those conversations, listening to these podcasts, because there just is so much more to learn that I'm not ever going to experience in this, in this body, in this human form, in this like snippet of our timeline. So
Right. And I think it's really important that we do understand those things and that we see those things. So thank you for writing this book. Thank you for putting your story out there for people to be able to look at and to view and to understand, so that they can have an understanding, or gain a deeper understanding of what they themselves have been working through. And I think that's a really important part of being a healer, is telling your story to those that you're working with, so that they can understand, you know, where you're at, where you come from, and so they can kind of see that, and why, while their path may not unfold exactly like yours, it may unfold similar. And so there's things that they can understand along the way. And where they might be struggling on something, you might touch on it, and all of a sudden you know, that's an epiphany, and they're just like, oh, now that makes sense.
I mean, that the beauty of being able to inspire someone else to take their next step, not to tell them what their next step is, but just to inspire them to take the next step, whatever that is a really beautiful gift that I think, all of us that share have, and a great contribution back into, humanity ultimately.
Right. And I mean, we're co-creating a situation right now where we're sharing this right now, and we're putting these stories and these tales and these experiences out there for others. So I want to thank you for being here and being part of this, for creating this opportunity for people to come and listen to the show, to view the show, to gain a deeper understanding through the conversation that you and me have sat down and had together tonight. So I want to thank you very much for your time and your energy
Thank you so
on
much.
doing this. And
Yeah, thank you.
we got just a little under 10 minutes to go. So if anybody has any questions, please ask before we wrap up the show for the evening. If anyone that ends up watching the show after it goes up, after it's up for watching on demand, you can put comments down, questions down in the comments, or reach out to me, and I'll make sure to pass the information over, and get it over to Demetria so that she can answer your questions. And also, guys, down in the description of the show there are links to her website and also her Instagram. So if you want to stay connected, if you want to stay in touch, please, please, please go check out those links.
Ah, perfect.
Hey, you got
Perfect, perfect.
any closing words?
I'd love to know your dog's name.
His name is Tanner. He is an Italian
Oh,
Greyhound Chihuahua mix. He is a
so
goofy little
cute.
guy. I got to cover up his feet, or he'll sit there and just chew on his feet. It's his little nervous
Very
tick.
cute.
But yeah, he's a little Italian Greyhound Chihuahua mix. I have had him for about 11 years now. He's 11 and a half years old. And he's been there with me, through a lot. He's been there through with me through a lot of journeys, a lot of my ceremonies and stuff.
Ah,
Um, I had an elder who just recently passed. His name was Chief Golden Light Eagle. I was talking with Chief one day, and I was at an event, and they said, you're not supposed to bring dogs to this event, and me and Chief are sitting there with our dogs, and Chief looked at me. He said, he said, it's important that you always bring dogs into ceremony. He says, if you spell dog backward, it's God. Dogs are connected to God. We need to always bring them into ceremony with us. And if anyone ever tells you no, tell them I said yes.
yeah, Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we have 2 dogs as well, and they are like our protectors of our family. They're like tiny little dogs. So not like physically protecting us, just
Right.
energetically and spiritually they are our protectors. So I really honor them and the role that they play in, our spiritual life.
Oh, absolutely. And even when I go into ceremonies here within my home, when I'm doing ceremonies here, he's right there with me,
Yeah.
and it's like he naturally knows how to handle himself during a ceremony. I didn't teach him. He just fell right into it. He knows when I'm doing ceremonial work. He knows his role in it, and he keeps his role in that. And he stayed spot on. And there's been a few times where there's things that I needed to be keyed to and alerted to that was going on, and he would let me know.
Yeah. I often giggle to myself that like there's a reason dogs sleep so much. And it's because when they're sleeping, they're just totally tapped in. So
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, man, you guys have it good. I don't know. We feed you, we take care of you, and you just get to lay around and like be connected all the time.
Well, have you seen the whole thing about if you meditate with a cat, the cat will start to meditate with you, and they've actually seen this happen, where that if you're meditating and you
Oh,
have a cat, that they've actually seen cats will actually sit and meditate with their owners.
that is amazing. I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to look this up
yeah.
and see it for myself.
Animals are so deeply tied in a deep, deep way that it's baffling that some people look at them as like, oh, that's just a dog or that's just a cat. No, no, they're deeply spiritual beings as well, and you need to understand that.
Yeah.
And so that's just another aspect of it. And yeah, so that's Tanner. He's always around. He shows up off and on. You probably see him popping in and out in the background of the
Yeah.
of the video. And normally I pick up his toys, but he kept dragging his toys into the doorway and laying them there. So I just said, "All right, that's it. I'm done. They're just going to
To
be in the
be.
video tonight, so they're there."
Yeah, totally meant to be. So great.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure. And of course, the conversation went to places I didn't expect and absolutely loved. So thank you for leading me on this journey tonight and
And,
exploring some new areas.
and you've done the same as well for me. We've the conversation. When I start into one of these episodes, I never know where the conversation is going to go, and I don't try to control or dictate that. I just say, wherever it goes is where it goes, and sometimes, we'll get way off topic, but then sometimes we get way off topic, and then all of a sudden it just makes sense and comes right back to what we was talking about. So it's a beautiful journey, and I want to say thank you again to you for being here, for giving us your time, your energy, for spending the evening with us, these few hours with us to have this discussion and stuff. And I also want to let you know that if you ever want to be back on the show again, just let me know. I will be more than happy to have you back.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So, at that, I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. Thank you for all the viewers that have been here. And I have so the schedule of what's coming up. Tomorrow night, I have in my book that Liz Foy is supposed to be doing a show with me, but I need to confirm with Liz. I don't know what I wrote that down for, but she's in the book, so I may be doing a special show because I normally don't do shows on Wednesdays. So I might be doing a special show tomorrow night with Liz Foy. I'm not sure what the topic is. I need to touch base with Liz and see what that was all about. But if not, on the 26th, Lori Kimberly is going to be here at 7 p.m. We are going to be discussing the divine feminine once again. We're going to be going deeper into the conversation that we had. It's probably been about a month ago, I think, that Lori was on. And then on the 31st, which is next Tuesday at 7 p.m., Demian Gover and Melvin Nix will be back, and we are going to wrap up the month of August with the same conversation that we started off the month of August on, which is spiritual hijacking, and we're going to continue that conversation and kind of finish that out. And let's see, on September 2nd, We have Chris Grant back, and we're just going to be diving deeper into the psychology of astrology that we had started. I believe that was last Thursday. So that's the shows that we have coming up. I want to say thank you to everyone coming out tonight and spending time. Once again, if you'd like to connect with Demetria, there are links down below for her um, website and also her Instagram. Remember that her book is coming out on September 9th on Amazon, so please go check it out. Uh, and then also, if you want to connect with the Breaking Reality community, there's some links down in the description to connect to the Discord channel, to the Facebook groups, and stuff like that as well. And there's also a link down there. I have people that make me say this. I don't necessarily like doing this, but there's also a link down there if you'd like to support the show that you can do so. There's a link for a PayPal and also for an Amazon wish list that has different things that I'll use in with the show in conjunction with the show and stuff. So if you want to support in any of those ways, those are all down there. Please feel free. You don't have to. I'm going to continue putting this content out no matter what. So I want to just say thank you to everyone and have a good night and be blessed.